Names. Today, we stand before a wall with the names of the Oregonians that died in the Korean War. We can read and touch the names just as we can on the World War II memorial wall on the other side. And just like we can on the Vietnam Veterans Memorial up in Washington Park. It's fitting and proper to recognize them, for theirs is a legacy we should not forget and we should learn from. But today I would like to recognize those whose names are not on any wall. The men and women who came home and found a nation indifferent to the effects of their service that it had on them and their families. The nameless ones we pass on the street with the cardboard signs. Those who have disappeared into the hell of PTSD and into the loneliness of the maimed and the crippled, both physically and psychologically. Mike Mullane, one of our members, wrote back in March of 2003 an essay about his last day in Vietnam and his return to the States. He ended with this paragraph. The following week, in the middle of a bright sunny day, I sat alone in a dark basement bar in San Diego. Two Mexicans, along with the bartender, were huddled in the front of the television, and they looked in awe as Walter Cronkite announced, "The Eagle has landed." I began to feel an intense loneliness, as if I were an alien stranded away from my home planet. Self-destruction is a terrific remedy to fear. One of those names not on any wall is Ken Rose. I learned yesterday that Ken had died on May 6th. Some of us gathered here knew Ken. Most of you have never heard of him. In 1968, Ken was a Marine serving in Vietnam. He wasn't a rifleman. He was just a cook working in a mess tent. But during the Tet Offensive, and only 19, enemy rockets tore through the sagging canvas, erupting in a wide swath of dead and wounded. He survived, but the guilt left him psychologically damaged forever. The reason some of us are here together is because of Ken. He was a catalyst. On August 30th, 1988, he took over Fort Vancouver. Ken was homeless, living in his car and outraged that there were so many homeless veterans. So he took action. Scaling the walls of the old fort with some gunpowder and fuses, he commandeered one of the cannons. He had left a note on the door, "If anyone tries to enter, we'll blow up the fort," and alerted the media. He then proceeded to set off the cannons. His subsequent arrest galvanized a bunch of us, and we came to his defense, standing with him at the Clark County Courthouse. He got 30 days and 200 hours of community service. At a news conference, he stated, "It's a national disgrace to see veterans sleeping under bridges and eating from garbage cans." Ken and I became friends and started an organization called Vets for Vets, working to get some help for the homeless vets we cared so much about. One of our first major efforts was to organize a stand-down where homeless vets could meet with the agencies they were tasked with helping them come together in one place. This was set up under the Morrison Bridge during Super Bowl week 1989. We had two general purpose large tents set up. One was a dorm, and the other was for the vets and the agencies to meet and solve their problems. Today, because of the work done by Ken, the Oregon Department of Veterans Affairs and the VA hold a stand-down every year. An interesting side note is that at that time, General Westmoreland was speaking at Lewis and Clark. We went up to beard the lion, so to speak, and told him about the encampment. He showed up later that evening, went in to talk to the homeless vets in the dorm tent. Later that summer, Ken and I organized a walk to Salem, where the traveling wall was set up. It took us 3 days, sleeping in churches and schools on the way, but we carried the message of the homeless vets along Highway 99W. Mike Hasty, one of our members, was one of the walkers on that trek and served as our medic. We called him Doc. I'm telling you this story because sometimes we forget that even though we carry the scars with us, we can make a difference. Ken made a difference because he channeled his energy in a positive direction. He turned it into love for his fellow man. I'm here because of Ken Rose. His story is emblematic of many who have been touched by the war and yet find a way to turn their experience into something good, something that reduces the pain and suffering of others while at the same time helps us heal ourselves. So while we reflect on the names on this wall, let us remember those whose names are not on any wall. Let us not look away when we pass by the homeless. Let us comfort the families of the wounded. Let us turn our anger or despair at the state of the world away from hate. Let us learn to love and remember that there is only one ambition that is good, and that is so to live that none may weary of life's emptiness, and none have to do the task we leave undone. For Ken Rose and all the nameless, I'd like to dedicate this day.
Here's an article I picked up on the internet. McClatchy newspapers, Mosul, Iraq. American soldiers opened fire and killed a 12-year-old boy after a grenade hit their convoy. The boy was found with dinars, $8.40 worth of dinars in his hand. Officials said the money is evidence of a disturbing new trend. We have every reason to believe that insurgents are paying children to conduct these attacks, a U.S. military spokesman wrote. But eyewitnesses said the boy, identified as Omar Salih, was standing by the side of the road selling juice, a common practice in Iraq and had nothing to do with the attack. A friend said he was selling cans of Pepsi nearby when he heard the grenades, dove behind a parked car, heard the machine gun fire. When the shooting was over and the patrol went away, I stood and I saw Omar on the ground covered with blood. Another witness said he saw the person who threw the grenade. It wasn't the boy, but a man in his 20s. He said he saw the man standing behind the truck holding the grenade as the American patrol approached. I was home a couple weeks ago when I came across this article on the internet. I happened to glance over at my 13-year-old son doing his schoolwork on the couch when a tsunami of pain and grief worked over me. 35 years of PTSD leaves you pretty brittle emotionally. A 12-year-old kid trying to make a few bucks at his lemonade stand, just like I did back in the 50s, gunned down on the streets of his hometown. And then our chicken shit military of brass, with my apologies to any chickens in the audience today, tries to absolve themselves by labeling the kid an insurgent. I want to know who were the real terrorists in this situation. Scared American kids with machine guns, or the scared Iraqi kid with $8.40 and a paper cup of lemonade in his hand? Combat veterans will tell you that the soldier who pulled that trigger is a victim too. He knows the mixture of anger and hypervigilance and fear that made him bring overwhelming firepower onto the point of attack, just like he's trained to do. Now the sight of that young boy ripped open in the street is going to haunt him into his grave. I know this from my own experience. Details available on request. So while young Salih is buried and the GI tries to cope with the guilt, the best and the brightest, the upwardly mobile, the owners of the United States of Amnesia, retire to their gated communities to commiserate about how these poor young American pogues could do such a thing. While their hands are clean, their stocks in our military industry swell up like a tick, sucking the blood out of our republic and the marrow out of our ethical bones which hold our republic erect. But little Musa Salih wasn't thinking about these things when he set up his lemonade stand that day. He was just a boy who could only dream of becoming a man and making his mark in the world just like my son, doing his homework.
I'm a soldier at war. I know you've seen my face before. Just the name and loaded gun. One more lost, forsaken son. I'm a soldier at war. I'm a soldier at war. I'm a soldier.
I want to thank you all for joining Veterans for Peace Chapter 72 on this Memorial Day. As we gather today on this beautiful afternoon, a passage from the New Testament comes to mind. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. All of you who know me know that I do not subscribe to any religion, and yet that passage resonates beyond those who do. Because of the efforts of many volunteers who helped build this space, we stand together at a place of peace. It is fitting that we stand in a circle, unbroken by those who would divide us with fear, prejudice, and hate. For that is how those who wish to conquer and rule divide us. Although I'm not a fan of General Douglas MacArthur, in my quote bag is something he said that cuts to the quick. The powers in charge keep us in a perpetual state of fear, keep us in a continuous stampede of patriotic fervor with the cry of grave national emergency. Always, there has been some terrible evil to gobble us up if we do not blindly rally behind it by furnishing the exorbitant sums demanded. Yet in retrospect, these disasters never seem to happen, never seem to have been quite real. In the novel Dune, one of the sayings is, "Fear is the mind killer." For too long, that has seemed to be what has happened to this country. But fear can be overcome. It can be recognized for what it is, a blatant exercise in propaganda. Do not be afraid. As I look over the faces gathered here, I see my friends and comrades who stood shoulder to shoulder with me as we told the world, at least this small part of it, we will not be cowed by fear. Some have been arrested. Some have walked into the halls of power and called out the officials who sit idly by while war ravages the world. Some go into schools and bear witness to the failings of our leaders who send us to war unjustly. We are not afraid to tell it like it is. We will hear from two people who also are not afraid of the powers that be, Cindy Sheehan and Benji Lewis. I'll let them introduce themselves after Brad does. They can speak to you, for they can do a better job of introducing themselves than I can. As we listen to them and reflect on the path of peace, we have this opportunity to also reflect on how we can be peacemakers. It doesn't take much. It only requires that we look into our hearts and understand that love can guide us. Those who would control us use our basest emotions against us. We do not need to hate them. That only feeds the flame of irrationality. We don't think clearly when we are blinded by hate. Years ago when I was blind, I was taking care of a friend's young daughter. She was about 8 or 9. And it was time to make some chocolate chip cookies. As I was helping her, she said, "You must hate being blind." I responded, "No. Hate is a wasted emotion that I can't afford. There's better things to do than hate. If we hate, we are no better than them. We don't need to be all kumbaya all the time. We just need to work from a position of kindness and love. It disarms the opposition." I opened with something from Matthew 5:9. Let me close with something from an entirely different source, Talbot Mundy, an author from the 1920s. The gods are not exactly lazy, but they are self-respecting and refuse to waste good mystery on work that we should do ourselves. Brad Perkins, would you like to introduce our two speakers?
Thanks, Grant. Grant Remington is the president of Veterans for Peace Chapter 72 here in Portland. I had the fortune of meeting Grant and a couple other members of the peace group by asking them if they would be interested in cooperating on creating this beautiful Peace Memorial Park. That was 4 years ago. Since then we have had 4 plantings. It's a result of 500 hours of work right here. It's just a phenomenal location in the heart of the city of Portland. We are able to memorialize not just the veterans that have died during the wars of the past, but all people, all civilians that are caught up in the ravages of war too. It has changed a great deal since World War I. World War I, 95% of those who died were guys that were fighting in the war. Today, 95% who die in wars are civilians. Keep that in mind when you have a moment of silence today somewhere that you feel appropriate to remember all those who died in war. I am fortunate today to introduce Cindy Sheehan, who to me symbolizes courage. A woman whose son died in the Iraq War, that got up off her seat and challenged the forces that are out there as to why we are in this war. That asking the question, why? And that has never been answered yet. We are all still pursuing why we go to war today. We all know deep in our hearts what leads us to wars, but why as human beings do we continue to be at war with one another as human beings? Cindy Sheehan is a conscience. She's one of the heroines of today. She's the one that camped out across from Bush's compound, and people from all over the United States gathered because of her energy and her force. If only we can do that same thing sometime in our lives, that we have the courage to fight these injustices of war. Cindy?
Thank you for coming out today, spending some of your holiday day remembering appropriately people who have died. And like Brad said, it's not just about our soldiers, it's about millions and millions of innocent civilians that have been killed because of this U.S. imperial quest for profit, for resources, for power. And I proposed on my website that we call this Remembrance of Victims Day. And, you know, my son and the soldiers that have been killed in most of our wars are surely victims of the U.S. empire too. And people want to call Casey a hero because he was sent to a foreign land, killed by somebody that he knew was not his enemy. And what is courage is not going to Crawford, Texas and demanding a meeting with your imbecilic employee. Courage is what Casey did in the theater of war. He was ordered to go on the mission 5 days after his unit got to Iraq, the 1st Cavalry. He was ordered. He said, no, I'm a Humvee mechanic, I'm not going. And his sergeant literally dragged him to the truck and he was dead minutes later. That's a hero. That's someone that has courage to say no to the U.S. empire. Because I'm not going to be killed for lies, but you know what? I'm not going to kill anybody else for lies either. This is a really, really, really hard day. It's always hard for me. 30 years ago today, I was in labor with Casey. And he was born on Memorial Day, was on May 29th that year. And Memorial Day sure has a new meaning for my family and many of the people who are here today. It's not a day to catch up on your chores or catch up on your shopping or go. We used to have a picnic for Casey's birthday every year on Memorial Day. That's what I should still be doing. But I feel so fortunate. I feel blessed because there are mothers and fathers in Iraq who have lost their entire families. There are families in Iraq who have lost their homes. There are families in Iraq and Afghanistan now, the so-called good war. You know, I don't care if you support Obama or not, but there's no such thing as a good war. And that's the conversation we should be having. People in Pakistan, in Palestine, in South America, in Asia, Southeast Asia, have paid horrible, horrible prices. So most of our country can walk around not even knowing that we're a violent empire. So today I want to remember the victims of U.S. empire, but I also want us to renew our commitment to ending the U.S. empire and never ever give up, no matter who's president. Never give up, no matter what political party is in charge, because whoever it is or whatever it is, they're committed to protecting the empire. So I'd like to thank the Veterans for Peace, the Peace Park, and Military Families Speak Out, Iraq Vets Against the War, Code Pink, IVAW, I already said that, for being here and always being here. You're here and you're always here. So we have to take the choir out to our communities. So thank you.
We have the honor to also have another speaker by the name of Benji Lewis here today. Also a person of courage that is living his conscience. Not what he was trained to do, but living his conscience as what his heart, his parents, his family, his community has said is right, it's ethical, it's moral. Benji Lewis.
I really don't even know if it's appropriate for me to follow Cindy. My name is Benji Lewis, and I was an Iraq vet. I was in the Marine Corps, did 2 tours in Iraq, and we get asked these questions a lot, right? What is courage? What do we think about it? People come up to me and they thank me for my service, and I'm usually taken aback by that. Say, don't thank me. I betrayed your trust. I betrayed your self-interest. Because this big machine, right? We call it the evil machine. It's a lot bigger than we think it is. And that's the scary part about it. And we focus a lot, we talk about language and how important language is, and how important it is that we're here and we're talking to one another and we're building this conversation. I think we spend a lot of time, we look at things as singular entities. You know, so we'll look at the Afghanistan conflict as a bad war, not a good war. But Afghanistan never went away, and it didn't start with Obama, and there's been conflict in that country for decades. And there's been conflict over all the country, and if you trace the money lines and you do your research and you figure out where that money is going and what their interests are, then you realize our interests aren't included in that, right? We're just a sort of pseudo foundation for a bunch of rich people, right? Well, we've already built ourselves a community here in the Peace community, and I was very lucky to have found it after I got out of the Marine Corps. I didn't know it existed before then. I think a lot of vets can tell you that peace movement, what is that? They don't tell us about that. You know, we're left in the dark about that. They control the media, right? But we beat ourselves up a lot in the Marine Corps, especially after a couple tours in Iraq, especially in the barracks, being urban combat instructors and talking to each other at night after a few too many shots of whiskey, right? You get that good whiskey conversation going. And when the Marine Corps recalled me in October, I already knew, and I didn't even have to think about refusing to go to Iraq, because I already made that decision after my second tour, really during my second tour. And we berated ourselves, and I berated myself for years because we didn't have the courage then to stand up for what we knew was wrong and went against every grain of our being, but we did it anyway. And why did we do it? Why would we do such horrible things? Why would we kill human beings for a GI Bill, for benefits, right? For an education, for ourselves, for our own personal self-interest. Well, I think that people, I've been on this speaking tour, I've been talking all over Oregon and the Northwest, and I think people like you guys here, we're starting to figure it out. And we built our own communities, and now it's time to bring it to the next level. And we don't have to spend all our time preaching to the choir. We can certainly set up, you know, some of that stuff, but let's just be a good example. And maybe they'll come to us, because I don't affiliate with any religion either, like Grant was saying, but I believe in two things very, very sincerely. One, that the kingdom of heaven is inside of us. And two, I also agree with Soren Kierkegaard when he said that the truth is a form of power, but the truth is suffering. And it's been corrupted. And so people have taken power somewhere else. Well, if we find that truth within us, if we realize it within us and we live it, that's when everyone else follows along. So thanks very much for being here, guys.
Thank you, Benji. Thank you, Cindy. And that is about it, except I would like to let you know that due to the budget, the Portland Department of Transportation Bureau of Maintenance no longer provides water to the Peace Park. So the Peace Park Memorial Foundation of Portland, Oregon has to pay to water this. Their tent is over there if you want to help pay for some water, keep our plants nice and blooming, then you can do that. So I'd like to thank you all for coming. I'd like to ask you to stay around. We have some refreshments up there. Mingle, talk amongst yourselves, network, work for peace, work for love. I'm going to put on some music that's upbeat, because I think we all need that sometimes to realize that, as Benji said, it's inside us, and so we have to work for that. So let's all mingle, get to know each other, enjoy this beautiful day, but remember why we're here.
I'm a latch hook rug. I was born on December 5th, 2003, because those represented hereon are worthy of more than bureaucratic form letters and political photo ops. Each symbol is for a specific person, color-coded according to the branch of service to which they were attached. Pieces of yarn are knotted onto my canvas. Standard rug yarn was not available in the desired colors, so I have 2 pieces of yarn per square instead of 1. The yarn used for the first 60 feet, enough to circle the local high school track 105 times, was hand-cut by the assembler's father, Army veteran, 42-year-old federal employee and World War II internment camp survivor. I'm 3 foot wide, like a hallway passageway. I'm about 150 feet long now and still growing. The more I grow, the harder it is for me to get out. There aren't that many large spaces available in appropriate, respectful places. I'm told one day when there's an official memorial built, I'll go to live there along with the contributions of others, sharing the loss, caring for others, bearing responsibility. Time is our most precious and finite resource. I give some of mine in recognition of those for whom it ended so prematurely. I mourn each loss as I see our potential diminish with each life cut short, and with the physical and psychological effects that will live on in so many more. I do know the loss is profound and merits recognition and reflection. I offer this tapestry towards that end.